Hey guys, welcome back to the Adaptive Zone podcast. My name is Matthew Boyd. I'm a physiotherapist and running coach. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, share it with a friend. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be setting goals for next year, for 2025. And if you listen to the show for a while, you'll know that each year I do like an annual project. So in Project 2023, Project 2024, this year is going to be Project 2025. And then I record a podcast episode where I kind of share my goal setting process with you guys, because I think it's helpful for setting your running and health goals in the context of the rest of your life. And you can't do that unless you have a goal setting process that incorporates how you want to set up other aspects of your life. And I found this quite helpful for me. I've used it with a few clients. They found it helpful. And I got loads of positive feedback on the last 2 years when I did this episode. And although it is a little bit like personal, a little bit oversharey, I get quite nervous about these episodes, to be honest. I'll try and make it helpful for you still and not too much like about me, but obviously we're going to be talking in the context of me. So the way I set up goal setting for the year, Project 2024 is to think, well, I'm going to expend a certain amount of energy this year, and I'm going to think of that as one giant big barrel of water. And then I have 4 buckets, and I'm going to put the water in the buckets. And the 4 buckets are health, wealth, contribution, and connection. And so what I want to do is distribute the water into those buckets as I see fit. So I want to do it deliberately. And I don't want to pour water on the floor. I don't want to pour my energy into things that aren't going to be like good for me or the world or wherever I want to put that energy. So examples of this would be like spending a lot of time on vices. So for me, like I watch too much YouTube is probably one. If you spend too much time gaming, that might be yours. You know, gossiping, doom scrolling, social media, like these things that we just spend a lot of time on that we wish we spent less time on. Whatever that thing is for you, that's you pouring the water on the ground instead of into one of the buckets. So the 4 buckets, health, wealth, contribution, and connection. What we want to do is set goals for each of them. Now, our running goals would come in the health section, in the health bucket. And I would suggest doing that one last, because that allows you to set your goals or at least have an idea what's going to be going on with the other aspects of your life. Meaning when you come to then set your running goals for the year, you're setting that up in the context of what's going on in the rest of your life. And that's why I think this is so helpful. This is why I think these episodes have resonated with you guys in the past, is because this is what I do. I've done it for many years. I only started sharing it publicly recently. I found these 4 buckets from some self-help thing, probably Tony Robbins. I don't know. A lot of stuff seems to come from that guy. But like the idea, I think, is really helpful when it comes to setting our running goals. So I'll go through mine from last year, Project 2024, reflect on how I did, and then how it's got me thinking that I'm going to set my goals for next year. I haven't set my goals yet or done my annual project yet. I always do it on January 1st. I sort of block some time off. I get some quiet time. I take a bit of time to myself to kind of reflect on the year, to look at the Project 2024 and what I wrote down, what went well, what didn't, and then sort of plan out for this coming year, what's coming and how am I going to distribute my energy, how am I going to fill up these buckets and what is the priority. So that's what I'll be doing on January 1st. But today I'm going to more reflect on, what went on with my goals from last year. And then that's the way I'd approach it if I was you too, provided this is the second time that you've done it. Now, as I say, when you set your goals, I would suggest doing health-related goals and running-related goals last so that you get all of the things. But the first on my list here, I don't know why, this is just how I wrote them last year, so I'm just going to go with the order they're in. Now, my health goals, as I talked about on the podcast episode last year for Project 2024, my health and running goals are pretty much the same thing. And I was talking about how my running goals were going to be extremely conservative, that I wasn't going to be, planning to do big races, planning to do longer race distances that I haven't done before, any kind of like destination race. I wasn't planning to get PRs or anything like that, or really attack some specific obstacle that I'd found in my running. And the main reason for that was because the other buckets were so full that my water was all going into those, right? So we had our 2-year-old already. We were expecting Cormac, who arrived in February and was just as energy draining as I expected. And, you know, the business was in its second year. We'd really start to see an uptake in people coming on board. I knew I was going to have to hire more staff and learn how to manage a team. So I just knew there was a lot on. And I didn't want to be like, oh, yeah, I want to do, you know, a marathon PR, or I want to do my first Ironman. I was just like, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. And it's just going to be a stress. So what I'm going to do instead is set some conservative goals for my health and running. And it was more about maintenance, like not getting unhealthy, because the year prior, you know, that was the first year in the business. And, you know, we still had, our little guy was like 1 then or something. And I'd gained a bunch of weight. I talked about this in the show. Last year, I gained like almost, I think it was like 25, 30 pounds. It was loads. And I was really stressed out, eating badly, not sleeping well. And, yeah, so I lost that. And one of my goals this year was just to keep that off, not let anything like that happen again. And I thought, like, weight, you know, it's a crude measurement, but it's a decent rule of thumb. And I was just like, just keep my weight under 175 pounds. And I did manage to do that pretty easily this year. I stayed actually under 165, so I dropped a few more pounds and just stayed in there. And that's gone pretty well. That's connected to, like, my running goal was not like a race goal. It was, you know, to work out, be that run or strength train, because they're the two things that I do most often, to do that every day. But then I thought, well, that's setting myself up for failure to do a workout every day, because with the kids and with illness, there's going to be some days that I'll miss, and then that'll kind of ruin the goal. So I was like, okay, well, I'll make the goal to work out once for each day, which will be 366 days actually, because it was a leap year. But with that, I don't know if I've done it yet. So I'm busy. I requested all my data from Strava, because I can't extract it from my Final Surge coaching app in such a large volume, because I'm the coach. Like, I can do it for my athletes, but the coach, like, can't get it for himself for some reason. It's just not an option on the little drop down. So I don't know. So stay tuned. I'll put it on my Instagram at Matthew Boyd Physio. You follow me there, and I'll let you know how many I actually did. But I don't think it was 366. It was probably pretty close. But there was a bunch of illness this year. It was like the sickest year of my life. Just nothing major, but just like constantly a little bit sick from the kids. So I missed like almost 3 weeks. I think it was in like October. Just couldn't work out at all. And that really set me back. And then there was a couple of weeks earlier in the year where I missed like 4 or 5 days in a row, again, due to illness. So I might have been a little bit ambitious, that goal, but we'll see. I was probably pretty close, but we'll get to like goal setting at the end of this, because we're going to talk about my goals for next year. So that was one. And then the other one, health-wise, which I talked about, which was, you know, last year when I made the podcast, was kind of difficult for me to share. Here I go already. I've had last 5-6 years, especially, a bit of a trouble with alcohol, drinking too frequently, drinking for the wrong reasons to relieve stress and anxiety. Talked about that a lot on the show last year. And that was probably the thing that most people kind of mentioned to me, be it clients or just people like on social media, just sending me messages, kind of support and just kind of saying it resonated with them. And that's gone so well. Like, my goal was for the year was just to, you know, reevaluate my relationship with alcohol and get to a better place with it. And on December 3rd last year, I decided to stop drinking for at least a month. And then I did this little challenge, which was called the Alcohol Experiment, through a company called, I think they're called The Naked Mind. And if anyone's interested in something like this, that was really helpful. So what they did is, like, each day you had a little lesson to listen to, and it was like talking to you about some of the effects of alcohol use. And a lot of the like symptoms, some of the symptoms were wild. When I came off alcohol entirely, which sounds a little intense, but it was, I mean, that's what it was. I was drinking most days for like a long period of time. I got like sugar cravings. I had trouble sleeping. I got like more stressed easily for about a month. It was not fun. And then that kind of all went away. And after about 2 months, it was great. I just stopped thinking about it altogether and have not really thought about it all year, which was very, very, very surprising to me and very encouraging. So I managed to just not even think about drinking all year. Even times that were stressful, I sometimes had a little bit of a period where I felt like it a bit, because, you know, I was stressed or whatever, didn't feel good. And I was like, oh, the alcohol will make me feel better, which was my old pattern that I was trying to get out of. And that, yeah, just didn't do it. And it went really well. And now I really feel like quite disconnected from that old habit. haven't reintroduced alcohol in any way yet. I don't know if I will at some point. I don't have that same apprehension that I did before, whereas if I have even one drink, I'll go back to that old pattern. I don't think I necessarily would, but I also don't really want to right now. So I'm just going to continue not drinking for a while longer and take it as it goes. So that was super successful from the health standpoint, because, it wasn't good for me health-wise, especially mentally. Just glad to be rid of that for now. That's really good. And then, so that was the health and running. So running, nothing too ambitious. Health went all pretty well. Next year on that side of things, I'll come back to in a sec. I'll go through a couple of the others first and then come back to it. And then I'll explain why you do it in that order and you put the running goals last. So that's health. The wealth bucket. Obviously, I don't want to share my specific goals on like savings and investments and like planning for my retirement and stuff, because that's just way too personal. But I hit all my goals, and I usually hit those because they're just math, right? It's just like hit this number, do this with it. And I talked about last year that one of my goals, it was used to be that I would save a certain amount of my salary and invest it in like index funds in my RSP. And this year I decided not to do that. I decided to keep the money in the company, the business, Fix My Running, we're now called. And I was like, I'd rather keep it in there than take it out and invest it in like other companies, like on the stock market, who, can't really vouch for what they're going to do with it. Might be good, might be bad, might probably make a small return, if past results or anything to go by. But, is that really the best I can do with it? And I thought, well, if I keep it in the business, that's quite a decent chunk of money that I can use to hire a team, to invest in promotion and marketing and that kind of thing. And, really build it out into something more substantial than just me as a physio/coach helping people one-to-one. And I really doubled down on that this year. So not just like leaving the money in the business, but like using it to grow the team, to train the team, to get better at these things and work on systems. And that's been a lot of fun. And it's very exciting for this year. I'm really excited to see where we go with it and how much further we can take it. We're getting really good results for the people who work with us. They're very happy. And it's just been great. So I want to keep doing that. And that's my plan for wealth for this year. Again, is just to do the same again, just leave the money in the business, use it as wisely as I can to invest in growing the business and just not worry too much about saving for retirement right now. That is my retirement plan, is to make the business bigger. And then I'll return to putting it in a retirement savings or something later. I was talking to an accountant the other day about setting a little bit aside actually this year. So I will probably do a little bit of that rather than leave it all in the business, just so I have we were talking about it from like a personal tax perspective. It would be like a useful way to reduce my personal tax and also get them the savings benefits. So it's like, but it's not going to be the main strategy. Getting way too detailed. This is not important. And you shouldn't be listening to me for investment advice or what to do with your money. Okay, so that's wealth. But anyway, what you need to do for your wealth bucket is have a plan, right? Like, what do you need wealth-wise, which is like savings, investments, that kind of stuff. And then what do you need to do to accomplish that? Because that's going to take energy. That's going to take water, right? You're going to have to put it in that bucket, which, you won't have to do other things, right? So that's where your work goes. Like, how much do you work? Do you work 40 hours a week? Do you work 80? Like, that's where that stuff goes. Like, so plan out what you're going to do on the wealth side of things. So I know, like, I'm going to work 40 hours a week, right? Even though I'm the business owner, I don't work more than that. And I don't work certain hours of the day or the weekends, right? So I have all that in there, like how I structure that to make sure, because as any of you will know, if you've worked small business before, there's a never ending list of things to do. So you could just work 24/7, and a lot of small business owners do. And I'm not prepared to do that. Like, if it means the business doesn't succeed because I'm not prepared to work 80 hours a week, that's fine. I'll go back to the clinic. But that's not going to happen because I'm going to use my time wisely. Okay, so contribution. So that's where, like I talked about last year, that I feel that my skills, my experience as a physiotherapist, now as a running coach, as principally helping injured runners get back to running and keep running for the rest of their life, is the place that I can make the largest, most leveraged contribution to the world, right? I don't have a lot of skills in other areas, but I have a lot of skill in that area and I can help people. So that's how I make my contribution. So some of the things I said from last year that I wanted to do was to help a certain number of runners. I wanted to help 100 runners this year, like 100 new runners. And we didn't do that. And I think I'm okay with that because I didn't realize just how many people were going to stay on with us. Once we got them over their injury, the vast majority of runners actually stay on with us for another 6, 12, 18, 24 months to get to that next level, whatever that race goal is, or big race that they haven't done before, or some sort of project that they're working on. And they want our help to do that without getting injured, or just to make sure that they have fun doing it and achieve their goals. And that has become a bigger part of our business than I thought it would be. And that's the reason why we haven't helped as many new people. But to that end, I have been able to keep Grace on, who's one of our coaches, and then Josh we just brought on recently in order to allow us to bring on more new runners and still support them in the way that they need to make sure they hit their goals. So that's all part of that. So that's the contribution side of the bucket for me. So it's like, how do you give back? So I used to be volunteering for me, but like I talked about on the show last year, I sort of realized that volunteering in things where I had no skills was not a good use of my skills, right? It wasn't a leveraged way to give back. So helping injured runners is a way that I can use the skills and experience I have from like 20 years of being a physio in a way that is actually contributing in a meaningful way to their lives and improving them. And that's where that contribution piece comes from. And that's what I'm going to continue to focus on this year. I'm not going to set a goal for like how many runners we're going to help this year, because that was a mistake last year. But I'm going to, another kind of metric that could be like an ambitious target for how to know if we've grown the business in terms of the impact we're having on a certain number of people's lives or more people, right? So it's going to be one or the other or both. But I haven't decided exactly how to measure that. But that's going to be one of my challenges for this year. All right, connection. This is the one I find a little trickier. So connection is like connection to your family, your friends, people close to you, people you love and care about, your community, if you're part of a church or any other kind of organization. Like this is your connection to other people. And for me, I talked about on the show last year and the one before, the social side of it, like friends and that kind of stuff has always been something I would put down goals and not do them because I didn't really care about them. And I just stopped doing that this year. And I wrote down the names of the people closest to me, which is like my immediate family. So my wife, my 2 kids, my dog, and then my like sort of family from when I was a kid. So my mom, my dad, they're both still with us, and my 2 sisters. And that's it. Like I wrote down their names. I was like, how am I going to remain connected with them? What's that going to look like? Am I going to call them? Are they going to visit? Am I going to visit them? All that kind of stuff. This one for this year is something I'm going to put some more energy into, because although I would say that the majority of these have gone very well, the most important one with my wife has been harder. Obviously, I don't want to talk too much about that, but 2 young kids and a fledgling business just getting started. It has been a stressful period for the last 2-3 years. Like a very magical period, but also challenging. So I think for this year, putting more emphasis on protecting and nurturing that relationship is really important. So I know that a lot of my energy has to go into that. A lot of my water has to go into that, because it hasn't been, top of the list this last year or so. The kids like went to the top and took all the energy. So now it's like Cormac is almost 1. He's like 10 months or something now. And it's like, it's time I need to put some energy back into making sure that my wife and I have a strong relationship. That was a difficult one to talk about without getting emotional, as you can probably tell. But that's something that I want to put a lot of energy into this year. So now what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll write my goals for each of those. And then I'll come to the running goals, right? So you can see it gets a little bit like deep and meaningful, but it's like, where am I going to put my energy? So if I just kind of recap my wealth, it's like, well, I'm going to focus on growing the business. And dovetails nicely with contribution, because I'm in a very fortunate position that I've been able to get to a place where I feel like I can do something useful and helpful for people. And that's the same way I make a living, right? I don't make a living in a way that I feel like extracts value from the world. I feel like I contribute. So I can dovetail my wealth, which is like generating a living for my family and financial security for me and my wife and kids in the future, with my contribution to helping other people. Like I can do both of those things through Fix My Running, which is like the business of helping injured runners get back to running and keep running for the rest of their life. So that's where those wealth and contribution goals come in. And then the connection goal is like mostly for me about family. For you, you might have like close friends and clubs and community and that kind of stuff. Anything that's related to that, you're going to put in how you're going to maintain those connections and relationships. And then now I know where I've distributed my energy. So I know roughly how much time and energy I'm going to put into the business. That's going to take care of a lot of that. I know a lot of my time and energy has to go into my wife and my kids, and I have to make more time, not make more time, but allocate more time and energy to my relationship with my wife, separate and somewhat separate from my kids, right? It's not just about like looking after the kids all the time, but also like having time for us and making that happen. So now I'm like, okay, now I know that roughly how much energy and time and water those buckets are going to take. And now it's like, okay, well, what's left for running? So my goals for running, like I said, I haven't set them exactly yet, but they're not going to be big again. They're going to be conservative because of all those things that I just said. Trying to train, 15 plus hours a week to do my first Ironman, which is something I'd really like to do, or to move into ultra racing, which would involve going out on the trails where I can't push the stroller, which means I'd have to find 2-3 hours at the weekend just to myself. Whereas at the minute I can do my runs with one of the kids so that shares with the family, kind of looking after the kids burden. I don't have to find separate time for running. I can do them both at the same time. Whereas if I was to get into trail running and ultra running, which I'd really enjoy, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm not going to get into ultra running. I'm not going to go for an Ironman, like a longer triathlon. And I'm not going to do any destination races. The kids are too young. I don't really want to travel with them. So I'm not going to try and get into London. I'm not going to try and do some marathon in a faraway country and make a holiday out of it, because that's just going to be stressful and a pain in the butt. The kids are too young and it won't be a good experience. And I'm not going to commit to anything too big. I'm going to pick some things that are small and keep me healthy and motivated. I don't know exactly what they'll be yet, but they'll be quite conservative. And what you might do when you do this process is get through all of that and you'll be like, oh yeah, I've got quite a lot of water left in my, what did we call it at the start? Bucket, barrel. I haven't poured a lot into the health, wealth, and contribution. And so, the wealth, contribution, and connection bucket. So I can pour more into my health and running. And perhaps you've let your health slide, right? Like I had year before last. And it was essential that I poured a lot of water into that bucket and made sure that I had that full before. Because, if you don't look after your health, you're not going to be connecting. You're not going to be generating wealth. You're not going to be contributing positively to the world. So health really should come first, but it comes last on my list because I was like, what room do I have? That's the way you approach it. And that's the way I'll do it on January 1st. So if you want to do it too, join in. Those are the titles. So it's health, wealth, contribution, connection. If you want to email me your list, if it's not too private to you and you would like to share, mboydphysio@gmail.com. I'd love to have a read. And set down your goals, make them realistic, make sure there's balance between them so that you have enough energy, enough water to do them all. That's how you do it. That's how I'm going to try and do it. I would give myself a solid B- for this year. So next year I want an A. And I think the reason, actually, this is something I was going to talk about, because tactically, the way I use this is I talked about last year, Project 2024, once I've written down the goals, I set a reminder in my phone to check it every 3 months, which is super helpful because then you can return to them and make sure that you achieve them or adjust them. I actually ended up checking it every month. I set a monthly reminder. And so tactically, that's a really helpful thing to do for your goals, right? First, you divide your goals into those buckets so that you don't overcommit on any of them. And then once you've set your goals, you review it every 3 months to see how you're doing. What I'm going to do, because I think what I got wrong this year is I set too many goals because I had multiple goals in each one. And, it's like what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I had good intentions, but it was hard to follow through on all of them. So I think what I'm going to do, I was just thinking about this morning on my run when I was sort of brainstorming what I'd talk about in this freestyle live show, was maybe just have one big goal per bucket for the first half of the year. And then once I achieve whatever that goal is, which I should be able to achieve in half a year, like I'll make the goal something I can achieve in half a year. Then set another one for the second half of the year. I think I might do something like that. And if I do this time next year, I'll let you know how it goes. But that might be a way to approach it that allows me to focus a bit more and not try and do too many things. Just like pick the big 4 things. What are 4 things I can do? What's something I can do for my health? Something I can do for my wealth? Something I can do to contribute? Something I can do for my connection that is like I either did it or didn't do it, and I can do it within the next 6 months. I think that might be a better way to approach it this year. So if I do that, I will recap for you next year how it went. Have fun. Those are the titles. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it wasn't too personal and boring for you. Yeah, mboydphysio@gmail.com if you would like to share your plans for Project 2025. Cool. Happy New Year, everyone.